Good afternoon, everyone. I am so happy to see you here to learn about some concerning issues to me, and a lot of my constituents have brought up concerns about wireless technology and the new 5G that will be implemented in a lot of our cities, and it's rolling out into the other spaces. So I have invited some guests, and we are hosting them to give us the information that we need on this wireless technology and how it affects our bodies, how it affects our minds, how it affects our children. And from what I've been learning, it is not good. So, and it has everlasting effects, and we need to raise awareness on the subject. It's like carbon monoxide poisoning. It's something you don't see, and it will kill you. And this, again, people don't see it, so they do not think there's a threat. But there is a big threat, because this is moving in faster than we know, and we need to be aware and protect ourselves. So hopefully we can take something away from this and maybe form some legislation in advance of what's coming, and to protect ourselves and to be aware of the situation of what we're dealing with. So I am going to introduce right now Cece Duchette. She is a communications director, and she also, she'll explain what she does. So Cece, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Senator Morgan. It is such an honor and a privilege to be here with you today to talk about the health effects of wireless technology. And I will come back to the microphone after we hear from Dr. Annie Sasko. Dr. Annie Sasko is a world-leading scientist. She's also a medical doctor. She holds 3 degrees from Harvard, and she will tell you a little bit more about her credentials. But I think what is most important for us today is to understand that she was a leader with the World Health Organization. So she thoroughly understands the risks of wireless technology, not just 5G, but also the 2G, 3G, 4G, that we are living with today, and that just means the different generations of technology. So with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Sasko from France, and she will tell us the science. Thank you.
Could you spell your name for me?
S-A-S-C-O. And I will give you a copy, so you will have it in any event. I'll put some clouds on the table. First of all, I would like to thank Senator to invite me here. It's a great honor to be here today. I want to thank, of course, Cece, who got me into this. Who am I? I'm an MD, and therefore my role in life was to cure people. But even more than that, maybe to prevent disease. Because I go back to the Hippocratic principle, primum non nocere, first do no harm. Of course, once the disease is here, we have to treat it. But if we can prevent it, it will make much more sense for the well-being of the people, and also, in fact, also for the economics of country, because treated people cost a lot. So why did I get into this field? As I said, I'm an MD in France. I did occupational medicine, public health, but I wasn't satisfied that I was going deep enough in the topic, so that's when I decided to come to Harvard to get first an MPH, then a Master of Science in Biostat and Epi, and then a doctoral degree in epidemiology, biostatistics, and evaluation. And I think all my life long, my goal has really been more and more towards prevention, although I love the contact with the patients. And which kind of things, given I was working with cancer, was I dealing with? Of course, at the beginning I worked on tobacco and alcohol, diet, the usual lifestyle, physical exercise, exposure to the sun. But over the years of my career, I spent 22 years at the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is the Specialized Cancer Agency of the World Health Organization. And I saw cancer incidence rates which kept on going up and up and up all over the world. And in fact, the number of cancer cases more than doubled from the time I started to nowadays. So of course, we know that the population increases in the world, and that we take into account. We know that the population is aging, and that also we take into account. But that doesn't explain it all. Neither does the fact of doing better diagnosis, more screening, and the like. And nowadays, I'm really focusing my interest, and I think that's where we will need really more studies to be done and more action to be done, is on children. Because if you say cancer is increasing, immediately people tell you, it's just because people live longer. But the kids, they always have the same age, so they are not older than they were before. And we know that if it were a genetic cause, it doesn't change in 25 years. Genetics, it takes hundreds of years, millennia maybe, to change. Behavioral, yes, of course, the kids do not behave exactly nowadays as they did in the past. But nevertheless, the change has not been drastic. So what remains? Then it remains the environment. The fact that in the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, the soil we put our feet on, and all the objects almost of daily living, we find now plenty of carcinogens, hundreds of carcinogens. Chemical, we all know about pesticides, about growth promoters, about whatever, conservatives, flame retardants, all these things. That's for the chemical field. And for the physical agents, we are talking about radiations. Be they ionizing radiation, which is what you get when you get an X-ray, or if you live close to a nuclear plant, or when there is a nuclear accident, that's ionizing radiation. And of course, this is a carcinogen. And we can, the good thing, I would not use such a term, but the thing about ionizing radiation is that at least it leaves, in a way, a signature. So there is very clear genotoxicity. So if you look at the cell, at the DNA, it's modified. And then we get into the field of non-ionizing radiation. So there are still radiation defined in terms of frequency and wavelength. So physicists have these beautiful charts, and I'm sure in some of these there is, and I have some drawings of that. It goes from the normal electromagnetic field of the Earth to higher and higher frequencies. So then you have all the wavelengths which are being used for cell phones, for microwaves oven, for radars, and then also the ionizing radiation, and then just the light of the sun is also radiation. So the matter becomes quite difficult to assess because the effect will, of course, in part depend on exactly which frequency, which wavelengths are we dealing with. And the difficulty nowadays when discussing the 5G rollout is that in fact it's so new that all these values have not even been defined. So that's the reason why all over the world, or at least in several parts of the world, they are picking up test cities where they are going to see, exactly which kind of frequency they will use. But the problem is, as far as I'm concerned, that this is going to be done without any prior experiment. For example, on experimental animals, on rats and mice, to see how they would react. And of course, as humans, we love to think that we are very different from rats and mice, or other animals. And we are, of course, You can see it. But on the other hand, a large part of our genome is the same. So what is not good for a rat is most of it is all the time not good for humans. So in fact, in the past 50 years, the studies which have been done to look at the carcinogenicity of new substances or newly introduced physical agents, when they turned out to be carcinogenic for rats and mice, then years later, because of course we live longer than rats, they turn out to be carcinogenic also for humans. Maybe not exactly at the same site in the body, but nevertheless. And I think it would be safe, to say the least, that at least before trying on new frequencies, there could have been a nice study done in experimental animals. And this has not been done, is not even going to be done for what I know. So what am I saying today if we don't know anything? Well, we know quite a lot on the preceding generations of radio frequencies, so 2G and 3G, which were used for cell phone since the late 1980s, 1990s. So on this one, we have sufficient delay to be able to see what the effects are. My field is cancer, so I'm mostly going to talk about what I know, because I think when you're a real expert, you should not talk about everything. You are an expert in one given field. So I will center on cancer, and of course I will say a few words about other diseases, because they are also important. But in fact, cancer has been the best studied so far effect of 2G, 3G cell phone use. So we have studies which have been done on people, in particular with brain tumors. That's the main outcome, because when you're holding a cell phone, of course, you're holding it close to your head. Whereas if you cook food in a microwave, it's further away. And I always told my young kids, when they were young, I said, you don't need to watch the food cooking. Because even if the microwave is supposed not to give out any radiation, as soon as it's a little hole and the door is a little loose, and nevertheless there is microwaves also coming out from there. But usually you don't put your head in the microwave. Whereas really with the phone, you are very close from the source. So back in the 1990s, studies started being done on brain tumors in adults. In the Nordic countries, in Sweden, Norway, Finland, by a group led by Ardell. He was among the first to do this kind of studies. And asking people with brain tumors and also people who didn't have brain tumors, which we call reference, about their story of phone use and how they were using it, on which side of the head were they holding their phone, if they were using it for how many minutes a day. And at that time, a regular user was defined as someone giving at least one phone call per week for 6 months. So of course, we are not really in the same ballgame nowadays. But even that, at that time, what we could see was that the people who had been using their cell phone most, or who were using, because radiations are more or less the same, cordless phones, had an increased risk of brain tumor. And what was very interesting in that Nordic study was that he asked people at what age did they start using a cell phone. And it defined as a young age, less than 20 years of age. And there, the people who had started using a cell phone before the age of 20 had about a twofold increased risk of brain tumors. So they would get brain tumors at twice the rate of a non-exposed general population. And at the same time, another very large study was being done by the International Agency for Research in Cancer, the IRC, which was called the Interphone study, which was conducted in 13 countries, not the USA. They didn't choose to participate, but Canada was in there, Australia, etc., and a number of countries in Europe, Israel. They did the same kind of study, comparing the people who got brain tumors with the ones who didn't get it. And some national results, when it was in different countries, started coming out. If you look at, have you ever used a cell phone versus no, then of course you don't find any difference. But in each study, when you were looking at the ones who had been using a cell phone for more than 10 years, or a greater amount of time per day, or at an earlier age, then they were the ones who had an increased risk. And we had this result for 9 countries. But we had to wait 5 years before getting the final result out on all 13 countries, so on 6,600 cases of brain tumors. So very large numbers. And in the overall analysis, we had the same thing. It was only the most heavily exposed who had an increased risk at 1.3 to 2, depending if it was the tumor was on the same side of the head where they were usually holding their phones, and depending on the location within the brain of the tumor. The most affected parts being, of course, the temporal lobe and also the frontal lobe, so where the phone was closest. Why did we have to wait such a long time before getting the result printed? I think the collaborators from these 13 countries could not agree on the words to put around the figures. The figures were in the tables. We could see there was a risk in one group that most heavily exposed by yesterday's standards, because by nowadays standards, they are very little users, had an increased risk. And the way it was written up in the end was an exceedingly cautious, but not in going in the right direction way, saying, yes, we find an increased risk for these heavy users, but they were some incredibly high value of use. People who had been using a phone for more than 1 hour a day, nowadays would not be incredible at all. And therefore, we don't know if it's just by chance. Okay, whereas my own analysis that you see the risk where you expect to see it in the ones who have been using cell phone in the heaviest way, however you would define it. It was at that time, when that study came out, that the IRC decided to convene a group of experts, who are people from all over the world, from different countries, who come to spend 10 days at IRC in Lyon and spend their time analyzing anything which has been published on the topic in peer-reviewed journals. So they don't look, for example, at studies done by the industry, but which were never published. So the process had to be through a peer-reviewed journal to make sure that a sufficient quality was there in the study to get to some conclusion. And at that time, in 2011, they came up with a conclusion of limited evidence of carcinogenicity in humans, and they also looked at the animal study, and at that time also they came to limited evidence in animals, and therefore the EMF radiations made it to a group 2B category, which means a possible carcinogen. You have to know, in the IRC scale of carcinogenicity, at the top you have a group 1, where you have no doubt whatsoever that the substance is carcinogenic. There's no question. Group 2A, it's a probable carcinogen. So you have some evidence, but you still have some questions in your mind. 2B, possible. Again, there you have some evidence, but really not that much. Then you have a group 3, which is very often presented by people saying it's not a carcinogen, whereas it's not what it means. Group 3 means, for the time being, we don't have enough evidence to be able to classify this compound as to the carcinogenicity to humans. So it means we do not know, which is very different from saying we know it's not dangerous. And then there's a group 4 for non-carcinogenic, but where you hardly have anything, there's one compound, caprolactam, because you don't go through that very extensive evaluation process for something you don't even suspect of being a carcinogen. So that was the situation in 2011, and what was classified as a 2B was electromagnetic field radiations. So it did not specify that it was only for cell phones, and in fact it applied to any device which can emit EMF. So it's cell phone, it's Wi-Fi, it's of course the antenna, it's all connected objects, but it's yet limited evidence. What has been happening since then? There have been one more study done in France, in fact Serenat, who looked again at brain cancer in adults and again found that the heavy users, defined in that study as people using their cell phone more than 30 minutes a day, have a risk of about 2.5 to develop a brain tumor. What was not evaluated at the time of the monograph, and I'm very angry about that, was a study done on brain cancer in children and adolescents, which was carried out in Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Switzerland, so in 4 countries. Of course, on a somewhat limited number of brain cancer cases, because these are not very big countries, so there were about 352 something, if I'm not mistaken, cases of brain tumors, and again, reference. This study is presented as a negative study with very strong affirmations in the conclusion, saying this study argues against the causal association between cell phone and brain tumor, and there is really nothing in favor of the carcinogenicity of cell phones.